This is AI First with Adam and Andy, the show that takes you straight to the front lines of AI innovation in business. I'm Andy Sack, along my co-host, Adam Brotman. In each episode, we bring you candid conversations with business leaders who are transforming their businesses with AI. No fluff, just real talk and actionable use cases and insights for you. Today, we have the first of what will be a multi-episode journey with Todd from Influence Mobile. And we thought it would be really good. Dan is someone that's working with Forum3. We thought it would be great to highlight his onset of implementing the AI First playbook and working with Forum3 to transform Influence Mobile. Welcome, Dan and Adam.
Thanks, Andy. Glad to be here.
Dan, let's kick off right away and just give the audience just a brief introduction to Influence Mobile. Why don't you tell us about the company and what it does?
Great. Influence Mobile has built an app called Rewarded Play. It's in the Android App Store, and we invite tens of thousands of people today to download Rewarded Play, the app, and then discover new games. It's best to think about it in the context of like an airline rewards program. So as people download and play these games, we give them points towards real-world rewards like Amazon gift cards. They can earn very large rewards, $100, $500 playing these games in certain time frames. So game developers pay us anywhere from $5 to $25 every single time a person downloads one of these games. And then we use a portion of that money to fund those rewards. And so we want to encourage people to quickly get into the game, experience the games, enjoy the games. But then what we're really looking for is the people that spend money in those games. They drive all the value for our game developers. We put a lot of focus on finding and keeping those people. We have retention programs and all kinds of rewards for those people that spend money. And we're generally giving them 10 to 20% cash back, which keeps them around and engaged, which makes other game developers want to continue to buy traffic from us. And then we just kind of continue to repeat that cycle.
And Dan, can you tell us a little bit about the sort of size and scope of the business in terms of employees and revenue?
Yep. So we have about 65 employees. This year we'll do somewhere between $40 and $50 million in revenue.
Great. And that revenue comes, your core customers are whom?
Primarily the largest game developers in the world. So companies like Scopely that build Monopoly Go. That game generated $2 billion in its first 10 months. They pay us to get people to play Monopoly Go, whether it's Candy Crush or solitaire games or whatever the most popular games in the world. They're primarily looking for people who want to spend money in those games, and we help them find them and keep them.
You have sort of a Mr. Beast model, so in the sense that he gets paid for generating audience, and he gives that money back to, fund his business model, and you have a game publisher, game player loyalty version of that. So that's a cool business, Dan. And on the AI front, we've been working with you now for a year, and you clearly, as CEO and founder of the company, you are a believer in that this is a game-changing technology, that business leaders and CEOs and teams need to be taking advantage of it. But you're also self-admittedly a company that is still going through its transformation journey on AI First. And that's why we wanted to do this mini series with you, because we thought it might be a fun thing for other people to sort of see in real life, like what happens and kind of where other similarly situated companies and CEOs are. So can you start out by telling us a little bit about, like, set the scene for us? Like, you believe in AI, you've gone through one of our boot camps personally with your team, but if you were to sort of describe, how often you're using either ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, how often your team is, kind of set the scene for us in that, kind of where you're at, like the baseline.
Sure. Yeah. I think when we first started talking with you guys, there was a lot of concern about using ChatGPT because there was stories of people putting personal company information into the system and it getting distributed everywhere. And, it was the, if today is the Wild West, I don't know what it meant a year ago, but we were both anxious to get started, but also hesitant to not do something wrong. I would say we've largely secured ourselves against doing things wrong. We have corporate accounts for Gemini that is very secure. We have an AI policy where we are clear with our employees what they should and shouldn't be putting into AI. But beyond that, so it's been intentional, but I would say it's still very early. We started making people aware of it. We started encouraging users or employees to be using it regularly. But we haven't necessarily followed up on it consistently. So I'd say usage varies. I use ChatGPT so much, my wife stops responding to my questions because she thinks I'm talking to ChatGPT. So that's how much I've talked to ChatGPT all day long on every topic, from personal to business to everything. It just becomes a source of creativity and bouncing off ideas. I would say we have other executives who maybe use it that much. Some people are using it less frequently. Our dev team uses it. I would say each developer has certain elements of their day-to-day flow where they use AI, but we're kind of just getting into this phase with you guys where we want to start to systematize it, make sure that we know what are the best use cases for each employee, for each department, make sure that we're giving them all the tools, because those are constantly changing, and we're excited to work with Forum3 to see what the best tools are today besides just ChatGPT. I'd say there's moderate usage. There's people who are embracing it just like any other company, and they're doing fun stuff on their own kind of solo. I was just talking to a guy today who's setting up his own servers on Render using N8N to create AI agents. So there's a lot of independent thought that's happening, and we're encouraging that. But we want to kind of bring it all under one roof and make sure we're all using the best, using it to the best of our abilities, and also not wasting our time doing tools that aren't going to be effective.
This whole podcast and this idea behind tracking the Influence Mobile AI first journey came as a result of about, 6 weeks ago, you and I were having coffee, and at coffee you were like, I want to push and become AI first at Influence Mobile, and you were picking my brain about that. Can you tell me what prompted you to say we need to go AI first?
Well, from those early wins, we have an incredible amount of data, for example. So there's the way I think about it, you can apply AI in a lot of different functions, right? So for content creation, it's incredible, right? So it's very good at, I can just give it a stream of thought and it can give me a condensed version of an email to investors or to whatever in a millisecond, and then I can tweak that. But when I start thinking about what I could do with AI, if I could access my own data, connected AI would be incredible. I have to spend hours sourcing data to get an answer that lets me make a decision in 1 minute, right? So the data collection process is very onerous. And so if we can get to the point where AI just has access to all of our data, there's so much opportunity there alone, apart from anything else that I've been talking to my BI team. I'm like, we have to get our AI integrated into BI. Then when you think about developers, right? If content creation, when I'm creating emails, is enhanced, how much better will code creation, code testing, code documentation? We spend a lot of money every single month hiring, paying for developers. And if we could make them 20%, 30% more effective, that just scales the growth of the entire company, because we're a product-driven company, getting products out, making sure they're tested, making sure people know what they're supposed to be doing and that they're doing them. So just everywhere I look, it just seems like at a minimum, AI could bring 20 to 30% lift, and then that directly translates into company growth. And so then when I hear you telling me stories about other companies who are doing innovative things, I'm like, we got to get on this, right?
If you were to describe, you mentioned you have an AI use policy. Would you say that they're using different platforms? Would you say that they're really varied in sort of how much they're using it and how much they're getting out of it? Describe a little bit about where, how you would rate or describe kind of where your company's at.
Right. Like I said, I don't follow up with everybody and ask them about their AI usage regularly. We were doing in our by bi-weekly company meetings, we were having like an AI segment and kind of showing people how to use Gemini. So there are people who kind of use Gemini primarily, and then if someone comes to us and has a good use case to switch over to ChatGPT, we let them use ChatGPT. For example, ChatGPT just really improved its image creation quality. And my wife, who actually works for our company, does all kinds of creative marketing stuff. And so I just told her, like, you should switch over to ChatGPT, because I was testing those same image creations on Gemini and it was inferior by far. So depending on the use case, some people prefer ChatGPT. I'd say majority of employees, like the developers, have it just because we're a Google shop and we're integrated into all the Google Sheets and those types of things. To be honest with you, I can't tell you other than kind of anecdotally. I know you can tell when people have been using it for their emails, and so like you can tell who's using it for emails. We certainly encourage it, but that's kind of where I'm hoping to get to the point where, if AI can improve my productivity 20% or 30%, I want to make sure that that baseline is being applied consistently across the board.
What outcomes are you looking for? What does success look like?
I mean, I would say success looks like, it can be as little, right, as like you guys telling us one or two nuggets that some other company has done, and all of a sudden we change one process that adds $1 million in revenue, right? Like that, even though that wouldn't be what I would be aiming for, that would be a success. But I think across the board, making sure that employees aren't wasting their time. Like, there's a lot of experimentation. Like I said, some of the experimentation is awesome because you got employees showing initiative, but there needs to probably be some cohesive strategy there. And then just make sure that we are using the best tools in the most effective way for improving our people, the people effectiveness, the processes. Like, are there things like the data collection and AI? I mean, we could be wasting tens of thousands of dollars a month in people time, pulling reports. We're not actually spending that time because it's so onerous. We don't do it. So then we're losing out on the insights of all that kind of stuff. So, improvements in people, process, and then of course our product needs to have AI, from fraud protection to app selection. Like, there's all kinds of things we could be doing. And I don't know the first step to do it, because I don't want to necessarily cram it down my employees' throats that they have to do AI in everything they do. But I want to show them the upside by showing success stories that you guys have seen elsewhere and encourage people to do it out of excitement.
So Dan, let's use that as a good segue. You actually just said something that I want to build on. You said, I don't want to cram it down my employees' throat. And I think that's actually a fair and a common sentiment that we hear a lot. Like, you actually mentioned two things. Like, we hear a lot of people being scared about their data being leaked or available in the public domain by accident through this process. And then secondly, I feel like there's not quite yet a cohesion between CEOs that are getting it, like yourself, and the rest of their team. There seems to be some interesting impedance there, and I want to kind of dig at that for a second. So I'm gonna you're coming on this podcast, you're being a little vulnerable. It's like a reality television show a little bit. Like, so I'm gonna ask you, like, are you feeling that your employees across the board, 100%, your leaders and your team 100% are like, we want to lean into AI, and we are leaning into AI, and don't worry, Dan, we got this, and we're excited about it? Or do you feel like there might be a passive aggressiveness there that might be going on that you're not aware of, or is it somewhere in between?
I would say it's somewhere in between. I don't think there's passive aggressive. I think, we ask and encourage people to give us positive feedback. I don't think there's really any reason for people to dislike the concept of AI. It's just they don't know where to start, right? And so you can tell people, go use AI, or you can show somebody a single use case that will blow their mind, and like all of a sudden they're excited to use AI, right? And so, but we have a lot of different employees in a lot of different roles, and so like for sure the situations where, again, like in our marketing team, right? Like, we create thousands of ad creatives a month, and so and video ads and all kinds of different things, and so the amount that AI can help with the creative process is just enormous there, right? And so there can be hesitancy in the creative world because artists really like to have ownership over the creative process. So I'd say there's occasionally hesitancy there, but beyond that, I think it's just a matter of like helping people get into the habit of these use cases that save them time, and then just building up a functional library of use cases where they're like, oh, when I do this thing, I use this tool, right? And then eventually, just like I use it now, it becomes something that you enjoy using so much because you see the benefits of it that they start incorporating it in other areas.
Do you actually yourself, I'm just curious, like, this is both a question and a bit of a best practice, I think. Are you, when you're having discussions with your team, do you have it sort of on your mind to ask the team almost every time, like, hey, what have you done to try to further this or improve productivity or improve quality using AI? Like, is that a question you're asking every day of your team?
No, I wouldn't say no. It's definitely not. I don't ask every day. It comes up. It comes up. There are people who are more interested and more excited about it. Now, part of that's because I just know we're ramping this whole thing up right now. So, my last call, we spent a significant amount of time talking about AI tools with one of my product managers who's very excited about stuff. He's being proactive. He's setting up servers. He's like, I'm not taking up any dev time. I'm creating my own server. I'm setting up this N8 instance that allows AI agents to do this, that, and the other thing. It's freaking amazing. I love it, right? And so he's in a different category, though, in terms of his excitement and his ability to use that and see kind of like he's kind of on the blue ocean of unlimited opportunities in the product side, right? Whereas like maybe my customer support team, once they've got a bunch of scripts for emails, they don't need to like sit there on AI creating 50 more. So again, I also think there's an opportunity to use AI more in certain areas. And so in those areas, I do bring it up more, but you're highlighting a potential weakness here, which is, I'm not beating the drum nonstop every day to make sure you're using AI. I tell stories about it and hope to encourage people. But we do want to figure out like what is the right cadence to tell people, remember to use your AI tools.
I want to ask Dan a couple of questions. And this is, for our audience, this is totally unscripted. So first of all, Dan, have you been playing with the deep research model of OpenAI at all?
I did. I used them all up. You got to be very careful and uncheck that box so you don't use them all up too quickly.
I've hit that limit too. Yeah, it's pretty amazing, right? And is the rest of your team, like, is that just you that has access to that? Because that's actually, at the pro level, I think they've actually now rolled it out to the plus level, but there's even less. You use up those things even more at the plus level. Do you who has access to deep research, and have you talked about deep research with your team at large?
I haven't talked about it at large. I did mention it a few different times. Like I said, it came on. Andy told me to like pay for the the $400 thing, but then like right when I went to go do it, it was available at my level, and so I started using it, and I just went crazy. I didn't really realize I could use it all up in like 2 days, so I just kept doing it for things that were not useful. Like it just kept the stupid button on, and I would say I only got 2 probably like really good forms of the deep research done, and I'm now like a few days away from my next month of allocations, but it was very powerful, and I could see using it as I get more personal use cases under my belt. I'll probably start talking about it more with employees, but I don't recall having a conversation with anybody about it just yet.
So Dan, 2 topics that haven't come up that I'd like you to just touch on lightly. One is, as you're increasing the promotion of AI amongst and with your staff, how do you deal with concerns of the employees around specifically being laid off or job replacement?
I've been pretty clear with everybody that I actually think the biggest risk of people losing their jobs is that they get replaced by people who are better at using AI. I actually don't see, like, we're not.
And do you hit that straight on? Like, is that like you hit that straight on with the employees?
Yeah. I mean, what I would tell people is we're not a 1,900 person or 19,000 person company where there's massive such massive potential for layoffs that you could see that happening. What I want to encourage people is, like, we want to get into the growth mode so that when we start growing again, we just need less people, right? So that's really the focus, is like, we want to be more effective with the group that we've had. I've even toyed with this idea that if a group of people could become 50% more productive, right? So in 40 hours, they could do 60 hours of work, then maybe I would give them one day off, right? So like, we split the value. So I don't want them to think that I'm
I specifically go to a 4-day work week is what you've sort of promised.
right. Well, I didn't promise anything, but I'm saying, like, I don't want them to view it as like I'm using AI as a tool to squish out all of the value and they get nothing out of it, right? I want to figure out, how do I make it a win-win so my employees are more productive, the company is growing faster, and maybe it's not a whole day, maybe it's half days on Fridays or something like that. But I want to take the tact where people are excited, because it's not just going to make them more productive and ultimately more valuable down the road, but that it actually might make them do more work in less time, and then they get some time off for their own families and free time. So
let's transition. Adam, what jumped out at you from, I mean, that'll conclude sort of our interview of Dan. I want to have you summarize what jumped out at you for the audience from this first of the mini series.
I wrote down a couple thoughts that are, Dan, that you mentioned that I thought was interesting. You've mentioned a couple different times this notion of a productivity lift of 20 to 30%, and that you've seen and you believe, without even having us prove anything, that if somebody's leaning into AI tools, whether it be for strategic thinking, decision making, or creative, working, marketing, coding, BI, you've mentioned these different functions, and you're like, oh, I believe that if people lean in, they ought to be able to get to 20 to 30% lift. And if enough people are doing that over time, that's going to translate to the bottom line of your company, both in terms of growth and in terms of efficiencies and making better decisions. So that was number one, that you kind of mentioned that. You also mentioned something else that I thought was really interesting, especially for Andy and I, and what we've been talking a lot amongst ourselves lately about, which is, you mentioned you're going to get more out of these AI tools the more easily you can get to the source of data that you is going to be relevant to the problem you're trying to solve or whatever. So you're like, God, that's a lot. You spend a lot of time getting the data together, and then you get these great answers. And so I want to sort of, put an asterisk or a highlight next to that, because I thought that was the second thing you mentioned that was really interesting, which is like, can we help you, or can you help yourself to like solve that a little bit? Because that could be a big unlock to get to your 20 to 30% productivity lift if you get after those sources in a more time efficient manner. The third thing that you mentioned, which I thought was just interesting, is you gave some examples of how your team is using it in different ways, some more advanced, some less advanced, and that there wasn't so much a general resistance to it, but there was an unevenness to it, and you were looking for ways that you could sort of make that a little bit more fully integrated and present in your team, and that was a challenge that you're kind of going to take on in the next 90 days after having coffee with Andy and hearing like and wondering how other people are doing that. So those are the three things I took away from this call so far, and kind of sets us up for the next 90 days.
Yeah. Well, I would say, if we can solve the data thing, it's a lot bigger than 20 to 30%. I think unlocking the ability to quickly access data is like exponential, like more than 100% improvement, because I don't do things because it would take too long to crunch all the data for an unknown upside, right? So like, we launched this new product that's been incredibly successful called Boost. It's all new data. So, in my 25 years, I've done a lot of data work. So I kind of have a spidey sense for what certain things should look like. But this product is not that. And so but I just don't have the time, because like literally like each of these campaigns are running and optimizing against different numbers, and I have certain reports. But I would ask myself like, hey, I wonder if I could figure out this whole thing. And it's either going to take 2 weeks, literally 2 weeks of my BI team's time to go set up a report to pull all that data, or I might spend 30 hours trying to pull that data, and it could just be I picked the wrong thing, that like it wasn't a meaningful data. But there's for sure massive insights, bigger than 20 to 30% improvements, if I could just get to the data and ask questions of it without having to like, build it into reports.
Yeah.
That's awesome, Dan. A couple of things that I want to highlight from what you said. First, I think you're, as a CEO, I mean, the audience really for this podcast is C-suite and CEOs. I think you did a great job early in this episode highlighting, sort of just leading by example, your own usage and process over the last year of starting to adopt AI yourself and getting comfortable with it and getting over the concerns and to the point where you said 6 weeks ago, I want to become AI first. That's sort of best practice. Like I think the CEO needs to lead by example. And I thought your example of using it verbally and talking to AI to get your use up, I thought was just a great anecdotal story. So that's one thing I wanted to highlight. The other is just the way in which you're approaching it with your employees, being upfront and transparent about the productivity gain and dealing with the job replacement, which is, I think, looking for win-wins with your employees. And I think there's a variety of different ways to approach that. But your example of possibly splitting that so it's a win for the employees as well, I think it's also really exemplary and other people can learn from. I'd also highlight and I think it'll be really interesting to track the real functional use cases. Is it customer support? Is it coding? Is it BI? And I also echo Adam's, like just from a personal standpoint, we're going to have lots of questions about accessing data, getting access to more enterprise data more easily so that you can make those kinds of analyses that you were just referencing. Those are the things that jumped out at me. Welcome back, Dan Todd, CEO of Influence Mobile. Glad to have you on the pod again.
Yeah, happy to see you both. Thanks, Andy.
So this is the second installment of AI First, following the AI First transformation of Influence Mobile. And we plan on doing at least one more installment. It's been about 5 or 6 weeks since we first recorded and started the digital transformation process in Influence Mobile. And just to set the stage for the listeners, or remind the listeners, I've been working closely with Dan and his AI council on a weekly basis to support them as they go through their digital transformation. Adam has not, so this is really Adam's first check-in, and we're going to hear Dan's reflections on the process as he's seen it for his company, as well as for himself, and the positives, the challenges, the negatives, if there are any, and what his key takeaways are. So with that context, let's dive right into it because we have limited time. Dan, could tell the listeners the story of the last 6 weeks and what you've seen from your team. Lay that landscape out for us.
Yeah, I'd say there's two different paths, right? There's my usage, which is influential because I do a lot of things that drive like the product implementation, and then there's me pulling people into. We have an AI council meeting with Andy, so it's a pretty big deal for these guys to be on a call with me, and we're constantly talking about AI. And the first week we were on there, several of them were like, I don't use AI too much. And it became pretty clear that better not be their answer 2 weeks later, right? And so we've seen everybody's usage step up. And so each week, Andy would sort of bring new things, best practices that he saw elsewhere. And we're like, okay, well, we'll apply that. So the first one was just start measuring it and start talking about it. And so we started trying to figure out how to measure it manually. I would say that was more or less a failure, but it did push us to get the enterprise license for ChatGPT, which has automated tracking. And then we have Gemini already rolled out, and that has not as good, but reasonable enough tracking. So but we were asking everybody to self-report. So it definitely made people more aware that they needed to be using it more. We did see usage increases. And then on top of sort of just tracking weekly usage and reporting it, we launched a Slack channel that awarded winners on different topics. So best personal use, best multi-model use, best prompt, and then just overall usage. And so then people would submit their ideas and how they'd use it, and we started promoting those. And I think those were probably the biggest factors, because when people started seeing how creative others were being with AI, I think it was blowing their minds. People were taking pictures of their backyard, and it was helping it figure out how to do gardening plans, and people were creating all kinds of crazy things for their home. Or eventually I got to the synthetic personas, where I had a fraud character and an anti-fraud character and experts in our business model and synthetic customers, all talking about like what we should do relative to some product advancements. And again, it's a little bit of a step of faith on how accurate it is, but it was 100% mind expanding, because it let me ask a question and immediately take into account more viewpoints than I would have without that. And so we're already moving forward with product evolutions that came from those conversations, primarily moving more towards choice, where players will allow players, because there were so many there's 4 different personas that came out of like 250 survey responses, and they became clear that like they all weren't motivated by the same thing in our rewards model. And then as I shared that, people were like, it was blowing their minds. And so then you started seeing people who maybe were skeptics using it. And so I just had a call last week with a guy who had previously wasn't going to invest in AI. He thought it was a fad. He used it, and he said it did about a week's worth of refactoring in less than 30 minutes. And so you're talking about 40 hours of work done in 30 minutes. Like, that was mind blown. And then as that's, as those stories continue to get perpetuated, you just get everybody excited about what they can be doing. And so I think that's where we're at. We're continuing to see greater usage. We're applying the things we're learning, whether it's synthetic personas or multi-models. I'm using more than just ChatGPT myself, and each of those things is building up. And that was one of the things you guys mentioned, or at least Andy mentioned 4 or 5 weeks ago, was that some of the companies that are doing the best work, it's not one big thing. It's thousands of small integrations across all of your employees that raise the bar and raise performance.
Dan, what has been your biggest surprise? Like, what's the thing that you were not expecting, that's either good or bad or otherwise?
I would say that there are simple things that you guys have told us that have profound positive impacts on your AI usage, right? So like you would think, for example, just last week, Andy started telling me the difference between 4.0 and 0.3. And
those
I
are two
had heard
models for the listeners.
Yeah. And, I had been using Grok. I'd been using other things. I thought I was a sophisticated user, but I felt like I wasted my whole life, because I had done all this work with 4.0. And as soon as I started using 0.3, I was like, holy smokes, this is a whole different ball game, right? And so, and there's just different like stages of learning that you guys were able to, Andy would share each week, like, you guys should think about this or that, the other thing. And each one of those things has been very substantial in its magnification of the successful use of AI.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, would you add a little bit of color as to why that was such a big surprise for you? Like, what had you done with 0.4? And then what did you do with 0.3 that had you go, oh my gosh, somebody turned on the lights?
Yeah. So there was two major amount. I mean, I spent days, full-time days, doing one of the other things I learned from you guys, which was building a bunch of synthetic personas. And so out of, I think, our second week call, Andy's like, you should look into this and build these personas and have these personas speak into the product evolution, even your marketing messages. And so I ended up serving hundreds of our elite players and getting back a lot of information. And I went through this whole process of creating knowledge files and custom GPTs with each one of these players. And then I wasn't satisfied with that. So I actually created like a meta version of that where I invited 7 different personas all to the same custom GPT. And one of them was this version called Randy Core, which I spent probably 5 hours, and it just kept getting so many things wrong. And so it just was actually raising my concern. I'm like, how come you can't do the simplest math? Like, it could get 85% of the stuff right, but then it's telling me stuff that I can just see on the screen is not accurate, let alone when it's giving me advanced reasoning that I can't even comprehend, and so as soon as I used O3 though, it started clicking in me that these were two very different things. Not only could you see all that stuff, Andy was like, you should go back and recreate all those personas, which I haven't had time to do yet because this was just last Thursday, but I was doing a personal project for my wife, which was this round the state scavenger hunt. And 4.0 was horrible at it. It couldn't figure out the simplest of clues. And then all of a sudden I started using O3 and it like blew my mind, a level of sophistication and thinking through and like, nope, that's not right. This is, and it now it ended up being wrong on a lot of things anyways, because it was like trying to predict posters on the back of walls in hotels and things like that, maybe things that it was accurate at some point in time, but became changing. But to your point, I don't know what agentic means, Adam, but when you can see the process of it's working itself through, I'm like, I felt like I was ruining. I mean, I just wasted my time with 4.0. Obviously, when it's writing just a simple email, it's fine. But I spent a lot of time doing data analysis that I now feel is completely wasted because I should have been doing it in O3.
Well, that's a great call out, because I feel the same way about a version of O3 called Deep Research, which you may have heard of, it's actually the same O3 model, but they've actually created a special thing called Deep Research, which is fine-tuned for analysis and research and report writing. And I found that when I put a spreadsheet into it, it would one-shot, meaning I didn't have to like work with it and explain things to it. It would one-shot nail data analysis, right? In a way I've never seen before from even 4.0 with Code Interpreter. So like to your point with these models, there's a lot of you got to like learn like, oh, when would I use a reasoning model versus a chat model? When would I use Gemini or Claude versus a ChatGPT? When would I use Perplexity versus search in ChatGPT or Grok? Like they're all different, but they become sort of a key part of the learning curve of being an AI first leader. And so I think what you're describing is very typical in that you've got to go through it and do some trial and error and kind of stub your toe and learn what works well and, keep up with the stuff because it's changing every day. But but you're right. Otherwise you could end up thinking that it can't do something that it can. And what I mean by agentic, which is worth mentioning for a minute, which is this notion of the promise of AI, believe it or not, when you really get into the mindset of the people who are building it, like the Sam Altmans and the Demis Hassabis's of the world, who are like the leaders at OpenAI and Google, they will talk about that the future of AI is all about being these agents that are like these like almost employees of yours. And so you give them a task and they just go off and get it done and check their work and then come back like an employee would. And like when you start to look at a reasoning model, it's sitting there thinking to itself, well, Dan asked me to do this, but I really know the context that he's trying to accomplish this in his business. So I'm going to double check this other thing. Nope, that's not right. And so it's basically like checking its own work. It's thinking things through with context that you've given it, just like an employee would. And that's agentic. Agentic meaning like it's on its own going to go do things, think things through, use whatever code writing or search or analysis tools it has, and then come back and help you. And then you realize like, wow, that's even, if I thought ChatGPT was good, back a year ago, this is even more interesting because it's more like what a knowledge worker would do for you.
I mean, one thing that we didn't talk about in this call is we're sort of building towards a list of AI first initiatives, and ultimately choosing one initiative that's more than just employee productivity. And so I expect that. But when you look forward, where are you excited to lead the company in terms of strategically with the help of AI as it relates to the next, like, let's just say the next 4 to 6 weeks?
Sure. Well, I think the next 4 to 6 weeks is a little shorter timeline. So I think within the next 4 to 6 weeks, we'll continue to see more individual evolutions. We are working towards the first product integration towards AI. We do have, Andy likes to call him a young whippersnapper who's actually all in that agent stuff. And he held the training session on explaining how he's got a bunch of agents working on things all the time. And so we're working on some data collection around device models that we think are going to be very informative in a variety of different areas. And so I'm going to work with him on putting some agents into analysis of that kind of stuff. So that's actually probably going to be, it's not going to be a fully integrated live product, but it's going to be live data. Then we're going to start using AI and agents to analyze this very important information for us to help predict fraud and also predict high value spenders. But then I also think just in the next 4 to 6 weeks, we're raising the bar in our accuracy of what product evolution we're doing, because we're challenging ourselves by not just assuming we know the right answer. We're putting this, each thought of like, well, should we spend time building this or that, and getting a more complete, package of ideas before we determine, we're going to build this product over this one. So I'd like to think that will manifest itself with, more productive developer work.
One thing that you just talked about that I want to highlight for the audience, because you talked about it, which was this whole notion of synthetic personas. What you did effectively was create you surveyed a subset of your top users, got real data from that, and then used that real data to create synthetic personas, which you then invited to a meta chatbot. So you're now talking to a subset of, say, 5 personas who are representative of your user base that's informed by real data. And then you also created another synthetic persona that has your business KPIs and business results, so that you can chat with both the users and someone who chimes in all the time about your business results. And as a result of that, you then wanted to work on your onboarding. And what you reported to me was you came up to a totally different conclusion than you otherwise would have by talking to that group of 5 synthetic personas. And I retell that story because you teed it up just a moment ago to make sure that people understood exactly what was going on, because I thought that was a fantastic use case. One that I had the idea of synthetic persona, but Dan, it was really your idea to create another synthetic persona with who could chime in with these are the KPIs, the day-to-day KPIs that we focus on, and have that come in. It's like having a CFO business analyst always sitting over your shoulder as you're making product decisions, going, "Oh, I wouldn't do that because that's not going to emphasize the right revenue result or the right profit result. I would do this." And so you're basically getting I'm reminded of Abe Lincoln's. What was Abe Lincoln when he had the group of he would have a group of both. What's the term that I'm looking for? The council of something of like different. He would have the Democrats and the Republicans, the council of elders, and they would all chime in, and then he would make a decision. And you kind of created your own council of synthetic elders for Influence Mobile to assess your onboarding, and it led you to a different strategic insight, a totally different path. And I just thought that was awesome work, innovative, that I want to share with the audience as well as with other CEOs, because it really, for me, it was, and I, being along the journey with you, it was emblematic of your own AI first transformation, and you stealing the pebble from the teacher's hand and going off and really innovating and leading. And so I just thought it was worth highlighting.
Yeah. No, it was really good because once you started, hearing these different opinions, it made me weigh, why, generally the reason, we have lots of ideas in our company, and the trade-offs are always how much work's it going to be to test it, right? And so you could have a great idea that's going to take 4 months to build, or you could have an okay idea that's going to take 2 days to build, and that might be better to do the okay idea first because you can get it out the door. And so what this challenged me to think about was doing this choice option, which I had initially thought was like, it's too much work. It's too much of a risk. We're not even sure that this new thing, this big time bonus that we rolled out isn't the best. And so it forced me to come up with a conclusion, which was, well, how could we test that without all this dev work? And so, yeah, the innovation was basically just put up a path picker that doesn't go anywhere. It's accurate enough to get directionally what players like what, and then measure their results afterwards. And so it'll probably take only 2 days of work, and we're going to get 85% of the value instead of having spent months and months and months building something that, after 2 weeks of testing could conclusively prove that we should have chose path A over path B. So now we're going to get the benefit of figuring out the right path, or proving that both paths exist in equal value to different players, all because of the personas giving me their feedback. So I love
Hey,
it.
Dan, let me ask you a question. Did you, just out of curiosity, did you just like create like a custom GPT with the different personalities saved as like different, like, I'll call it knowledge files that so you could effectively, it was you chatting and saying, hey, I want you to now pretend you're this, and it knew how to go into that role, and then I want you to pretend you're this, and then, or did you actually create something where they were like talking to one another without you starting the prompt?
I did both. So I initially created them all as individual, and then I found it was super annoying to, like, I'd take
Yeah,
one
to go
person's
back and
feedback.
forth. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I created a group one, and then I just kept coming up with ideas of additional personas. And so, yeah, eventually I created this big round table of like 8 different personas that all had different perspectives. And
Yeah.
then I'd put in the information, and but it was a custom GPT. Part of
Yeah.
the prompt was they would talk back to them between each other and give themselves feedback. And then it would come back with the kind of the collective
Oh.
wisdom of the crowd.
Oh, you would sort of, I get it. That was really smart, Dan. So
Isn't that cool?
That's very clever. So you basically said, hey, I'm going to give you the information you need so you can play the role of all these different people, if you will, that have these different sort of knowledge sets and perspectives and priorities. And then I want you to like have an internal conversation with yourself effectively, and then come back and tell me like what each person sort of said. And yeah, fascinating.
Dan, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being totally exceeded your expectations, 1 completely missed your expectations, how has AI transformation been for you at Influence Mobile?
I would say it's an 8 trending towards a 10, right? Because you asked about like what the next big thing is. And I think once we really start understanding how to put AI and machine learning type concepts built into our products, there's still plenty of room for improvement by moving there. And I think we're getting there. I've got developers excited who are already talking to. I'm telling them about future products, and they're already on this side testing how they can train models and do different things. So we've got the water boiling, right? And I think there's lots more to come. So I've been very happy with it, but I do think there's still a lot of upside to be captured. So
in terms of advice you have for CEOs who have not started the transition, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's very little downside to doing this. I could imagine maybe in a gigantic company, there's some risks that I don't that I can't anticipate, but I don't see there being too many negatives to getting people to start spending their time both personally and on the in the work day using AI tools just to start to understand it. And what I tell my employees is that, there's this conversation that, AI is going to replace people. And that could be some edge cases where that's true, but I actually 100% believe that people who are good at using AI are going to replace people who are not good at using AI. That's 100% true. So if you're a developer or you're a content creator or you're a customer supports person, using AI to make you yourself 20, 30, 50%, 100% more effective is probably one of the best things you can do for yourself from just a career trajectory. And then I think smart employers are going to find a way to leverage that and find a fair balance. Like what I've told employees is like, I'm not just trying to squeeze every piece of juice out of the lemon. Like if you can become 50% more productive, maybe you're working 10% less and getting paid 20% more, and everybody's ahead, right? Over the longer haul. And so I want employees to understand that, their investment in this is going to improve their day-to-day work. It's going to improve their personal life. It's going to improve all these different things. And I think when people trust you and get behind that, they will invest their time.
Dan, thank you for checking in. I can't wait to continue the journey with you and Influence Mobile on your your AI digital transformation. Adam, do you have any highlights that you want to summarize from what you've heard? You've not been on the journey, but you've heard me talking about it. Anything jump out at you?
Yeah, the two things that the two things that jump out at me, first of all, is when you're outside the forest for the trees on this journey that you guys are on, it starts with you, Dan, and your mindset. Like you guys have been in it, and it's kind of amazing that what you've been learning and surprised by and experimenting with. But if you step back, it's you. Like if you hadn't have said, I'm gonna push on this, and I think it can make our company better, but I need to do it in the right way, and the right way for my company. Like that, we talk a lot about that, but to see it in action is key, because if you weren't sponsoring this and doing it yourself, if you personally weren't getting your hands dirty and learning yourself, then there's no way your organization was going to push through and get to wherever you're going to go on this journey, which I'm positive is going to be a net positive for you and your people and your company. So that's my first reflection. And my second one is just, you're a good reminder of like the need to try things and fail and experiment. So like that, I think a lot of people are afraid of getting going on this journey because they don't know what they don't know, and it's just kind of overwhelming to them. And I love how you just were like, well, let's just start playing with this and let's see what's possible. And you're even self-deprecating and humorous about like, I wasted my whole life on this 4.0 when I could have been using 03. And like, but that's what Andy and I found is that is the journey for, the people that are really at the edge of it. That there's not like some magic, classroom you can go to like learn all this stuff. It's just moving too fast and it's too weird and wild. So I feel like your journey is pretty emblematic of what I think a really successful, bumpy learning journey is going to look like in this space.
Greetings, Dan, Todd.
Hello, gentlemen.
Welcome back to the AI First podcast for the third installment of the transformation of Influence Mobile, and super excited that this is the third and last installment of our series. And for those of you that have not listened to the first two episodes, we've been tracking Dan Todd's work with Forum3 and his transitioning of Influence Mobile into an AI first enterprise. And today we want to hear how it went, what his learnings were, what was good, what was bad. And then we also want to hear about his own personal journey about becoming what I would claim is an AI first CEO. So Dan, why don't you give us the high level overview of the approximately 90-day journey that you've been on with your team, and talk about any results, any challenges. Just give the audience a summary.
Sure. Yeah. So AI has been on my radar since, it came out, and I was certainly dabbling with ChatGPT last year. But I think the focus that I put on after you and I chatted earlier this year was to make sure that every employee in my company could benefit from the day-to-day implementation of AI into their workplace. And I would say we got an A+ in that regard. The stories of people from the most technical to the least technical. I mean, people who were self-described non-techies are now doing SQL queries with the help of ChatGPT. Developers are cutting their work time down by 50 to 70% to get tasks out the door. We actually have AI-enabled technologies coming that are in the works right now, where we're doing very substantial data analysis and analytical work that then moves into tactical changes in our product based on AI analysis and help. And so I've been really happy with the transition. We've used a lot more tools, but at the same time, I've become keenly aware of the massive mistakes that AI can still implement into the workplace. And so, I think many people I talk to are fearful that AI is going to replace jobs, and, certainly going to reduce jobs at some companies. But more specifically, people that are really good at using AI as a brainstorming partner, as a workflow automation helper, those are the people that are going to replace jobs. And so I've really encouraged my employees, not only for the betterment of Influence Mobile, but for the betterment of their career, to make sure that they jump in and are at the front end of this technology. You don't have to get very big of a lead to start knowing a lot more than everybody else, and to be able to keep up with the cutting edge changes, which are coming very fast. And so I've greatly appreciated my time with you guys, and we're definitely way better off because of our investment in this area.
You've not been on up close and personal to this transformation as I have. You have anything you want to ask Dan? Or
yeah, Dan, what, from your perspective, I mean, I remember on our last episode, you talked a bit about some of your own personal revelations of like, oh my God, I hadn't really been using O3 as much as I should be. And I, and sort of your own journey. But I want to ask you as a manager, like, you got your team to use this, you just gave some examples, but like, what's been, give us an example or two of where, like, how it feels for you. Have you noticed your organization, I'll call it, moving a little faster, or, producing, I'll call it, emails or reports to you that you've noticed are at a little higher quality or didn't take as long to get generated? Like, how have you, I want to ask you as a manager, how have you felt the improvement of your organization by the fact that they're using AI?
Yeah. I mean, every day I get reports that come from leadership people who are doing massive depth analysis that they just wouldn't have had the time to do before, right? I think people feel more confident pulling in disparate data fields and putting them all together and helping them do summaries. Like I said, from the actual productivity side of things, we have a smaller team than we've had in the past, and yet some of those teams have said they are equal or more productive with AI than they were with a larger team, right? So the application of AI at that particular time this year has really been helpful, like I said, to, whether it's the BI team or the dev team, like across the entire organization. Everybody is using it. People who were once skeptical are using it. People who were scared of it are using it, and they're seeing it as a really valuable tool. And yes, on a day-to-day basis, it makes me very happy to see the individual improvements, but I still think some of the biggest unlocks are 90 days away, where after we've got this ball rolling in this momentum, we've got 3 or 4 big projects that are implementing versions of AI/machine learning that I don't think we would have prioritized as much as we are now. And I can't wait to get those things out and live and impacting the business. So day to day, as a manager, I've seen a big impact. In my own personal work, it's a great thought leader, and it gives it gives a level of depth to the work that I do, which is a lot of times product specking that I never had in the past. Like, I would do a 1-page Google write-up of what I wanted to kind of generally see. Now it's super detailed with a lot more analysis, and I think easier for the product team to turn into a high level, or actually to a detailed level spec.
Dan, if you were talking to your friends who are CEOs or members of our audience who are CEOs who have not embarked on the AI journey themselves or with their companies, what would you say to them?
I would say the significance of what AI can do for your business is no less significant than the changes that occurred from the internet itself, which is pretty monumental, right? I mean, like there were just fundamentally things that we couldn't do. Like my business couldn't be in existence without the internet, right? So I told my employees during our training, like, even though the internet displaced a lot of jobs, it created more jobs in general, right? And so AI right now is set up to give massive fuel to the fire for anybody who invests in it. And so I think falling too far behind gives your competitors and your enemies and whoever's working against your business a head start that you don't want to give them.
One other comment that I think I heard you make earlier that I want to pull on for a second, which is really interesting, is how I think maybe I misheard you, Dan, but I think you said, it's still one of the things you've learned is what it's good at and what it's not good at, and like where it's helpful, where it makes mistakes, and which is a really important lesson. Like, in fact, I was just talking to another group of people this morning and saying that, look, is this eventually going to replace all of our jobs? Probably, but I don't know when, because the truth is, it as it gets better and better, you almost need humans to sort of be discerning more and more. So we end up all becoming kind of managers of AI systems in some ways, which is really weird and interesting, right? So I wanted to kind of ask you about that topic. Like, have you had an example? You don't need to throw anybody under the bus, but have you had an example of like getting an email or report from one of your people where you wondered if they had actually read it and understood it, or if they just generated it by AI?
I haven't seen that. I think at different levels it can happen to any of us. It certainly happened to me where the work that I was doing was several levels of data science proficiency above my abilities, and I went several days down paths where I made I said one sentence wrong to AI, for example, on this humongous data set, and it came back with a really smart answer, and I'm like, oh, this is perfect. And I kept working on that for 3 or 4 days, and it took me almost to the end of that next week to realize that one sentence a week earlier had cut off 90% of my data set. So I wasted a whole week of time analyzing a subset of data because I didn't take the time to go, oh, I just kept asking it meta questions about the data, but it had cut off basically 1 million rows out of 1.5 million rows. And so I am fearful that can happen all the time. And so I'm constantly telling people, like, the more significant the analysis that you're doing, the more you have to, for sure, double check with other AI systems, and then try to find experts who know what they're doing, because it is very easy to misinterpret, especially people right now who they're doing. I mean, we have a lot of different data points that inherently a lot of our employees don't understand. So AI makes it easier to go down the wrong path. So it's probably, like I said, the biggest dark shadow over AI is you have to remain eternally vigilant, or you'll send out something that's really wrong.
Right. Because that's interesting, isn't it, Andy and Dan? Like that topic is so interesting, where it's like, on the one hand, we almost seem like we're so hyperbolic and hyped about, like, oh my God, you got to use this all the time and it's amazing. And yet it almost seems counterintuitive that we're like, yeah, but you have to stay very vigilant on this stuff. Like, at times it's amazing, there's a temptation to just let it do a lot of work for you, but you've got to check it because it makes mistakes. And sometimes they're mistakes of reasoning or analysis. Sometimes it's like you said, it'll get something wrong just factually, or data set got cut off. And so it's a weird counterintuitive thing that we could be so enthusiastic about it, but at the same time be so almost cautious about it. At the same time, you have to, they go together, but that's not a normal pairing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think where it has benefited me is where it becomes a thought partner for me to refine my own thinking within the scope of knowledge that I'm already proficient at, right? Because I can then control its errors, and I can say, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And so, but it helps me get deeper and deeper into projects, and I can constantly kind of like click it back into the thing where I wish it was perfect, and where I run into the biggest errors is like when I start doing massive data set analysis, and it's like suggesting random tree regression and things that I have zero, I wouldn't even know how to validate, right? I would need a super smart data scientist, which we don't have on staff, to validate those things. So in those areas, to your point, Adam, is like super promising, and I love that potential's there, but I've seen it make so many mistakes that I'm extra cautious of the data analysis end results. It doesn't mean that it can explain to me the methodology, and I can go try to do that methodology myself, but I'm very skeptical of massive data analysis that I can't verify.
Yeah.
And, I want to switch gears for a little bit because we have limited time with you. Talk about your own transformation and really, like, the frequency with which you yourself use AI, and really what does it mean from your perspective to be an AI first CEO?
Yeah, so the usage reporting that we were doing with you guys to kind of show increased usage, the first month was kind of shocking to me when I realized that I had used AI on average every 10 minutes for one straight month. And so that apart from sleep time. And so what I realized was, 2,000 interactions spanned just a massive, across personal, work related, random questions. I never Google anything anymore. Everything's ChatGPT, right? And so it's become as significant of a work partner as my laptop, right? Like, I use my laptop every day. I couldn't do my job without my laptop. I could do my job without AI, but I couldn't do my job without AI as efficiently as I do today. And so that just becomes, like I said, it becomes a new tool that you have. You're still, people still built houses when they came up with, the air hammer. They just did it a lot faster. And so AI is, for me, become this very beneficial tool that really lets me work at very fast efficiency. And it actually also lets you be better reflector on what you should be doing, because you can always ask ChatGPT, am I doing the right things in my job, right? Should I be reassessing if I do want to do this? And so I think that's one of the most useful aspects of AI is you can help, it will help you use it more efficiently. And so I think if people don't, I tried to just jump right in, and I made a lot of mistakes, as some of them I told you guys, but the more comfortable you are, once you start understanding how to change the models and even using a bunch of different versions, Grok versus ChatGPT. Initially, I didn't really understand why anybody would even do that. Now I see the benefits of using those different things. So for me, it's just been a lot of experimentation and trying to figure out where to fit it into my life to make my life more efficient.
And how would you say it's changed your job?
I don't know that it's changed my job. It has allowed me more time for certain things. So, if I was going to send out a large email to investors or my employees, I might spend an hour and a half proofreading that sucker, right? And now I do not have to do that. I speak into ChatGPT, It comes back. It usually doesn't have the perfect tone or exactly what I want, but it takes what might have been 90 minutes down to 10 minutes. And so like that doing that a lot of different times starts to free up a lot more time. So then that allows me to reinvest that time into product innovation. And then, like I said, that helps me be a better, because it's able to like pull in all of this broad set of information for me to be considering as a product person, which has made that part better. And so like, as it starts to replace low efficiency work, it lets you spend more time in deep, higher value work. And then it helps you be more effective at that higher value work. So, I don't think it's unrealistic to think that people are 2x or 3x, like not 20%, but 2 times to 300% more efficient, because you're shifting your time from the redundant sort of administrative things, which it's very good at, into deeper level analysis if you're using it consistently.
Can you, while we're on the quantification of you becoming 2x, 3x more efficient and more productive as CEO, can you talk about really the journey of the last 90 days and what you saw in terms of the growth in chats amongst the team, and how you quantified that or translate that into productivity gain for the company?
Yeah. So, thanks to your guys' prompting, we upgraded to the enterprise version of ChatGPT so we could track individual. We started to do it manually, and that burned people out pretty darn quickly. But between Gemini and ChatGPT, we have a fairly consistent ability to show total usage. And we started rewarding people for the best prompts and the best uses of models, and started pushing out people who were adopters within our own company, what they were doing. And that kind of caught a fire with people on top of me constantly bringing it up. And yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but we have seen 20 to 30% week over week growth of AI usage for 3 straight months. I don't think we have a single employee who doesn't use AI. There's still some who don't use it as much as others for sure. But we've also, I'd say the top 10% of people probably represent half of all the usage. So you got some really heavy users, but we're also making sure that the 80-20 rule works in our favor. We're trying to make sure that, everybody, the big long tail of people, are all using it more consistently. And so we've just, seen good results from the methodology that you guys helped us apply.
If you had to quantify that and just in your own mind, comparing to the organization of 90 days ago, you're what more productive?
If I just had to pick a number, I'd say at least 50% more productive, right?
Okay.
Because, not every single person is using it the same degree that I am, but I definitely know, like, we have a lot of developers and a lot of the developers are using it. And I've had developers tell me that something that I had one specific person tell me they were able to do a 40-hour project in 3 hours. And another person tell me they were able to do a 10-hour project in 2 hours. So that's, between 80 and, 60 and 80% reduction in total time. And not everybody's doing that for every single project. But I think, there's some people who are probably 200% more productive and some people that are 20. So I would definitely say 50% is a conservative estimate.
Adam, you get the final question, and then we'll summarize our perspective on what we've heard. Do you have anything you want to ask Dan before we transition?
You said one of your breakthroughs that you said you were to get the whole company to sort of be a little bit more excited and more engaged in using AI to help them be better. Is it, you said you did it? Did you do a prompt contest or did you just do like office hours? What was the specific tactic you used?
So we created an AI knowledge share in Slack, and we had a weekly contest for a free lunch across 4 different things: total AI usage, best prompt, best personal use, and best multi-model use. So
yeah, great.
And so,
and how did you do the grading against the rubric? Did you do it, or do you use AI to do it, or who decided?
So I created a rubric from AI. I published that, so everything was graded on a scale of 1 to 10 on 5 different factors, and then I would pump everything in. It would come back with the score. I'd largely just review that and say, like, does that feel right relative? There was a couple times where, like, two people did so awesome and the score was like slightly less, that I would just award it both. But yeah, I tried to use AI for all the scoring, and then I published it all. Then we use AI to create little fun emoji pictures of the winners, and we post that in the Slack channel. And then, like I said, and then we just kept trying to bring a lot of exposure to it in the company meetings. And so, thankfully people had a willingness to, to jump in.
That's great, Dan.
Yeah, that is great. I mean, with that, normally at this point, I turn to Adam and ask him for a summary, but I think I'm going to actually start with you, Dan, to give your own summary of the transformation. Like, you say whatever you want to our audience in conclusion.
Yeah.
Dan, Todd.
I would say that, your investment in AI should begin sooner than later. And if you don't have a clear vision of what that path should look like, get people like Forum3 to help you, right? So you don't want to invest unwisely in AI and waste your time and bring people down the wrong path. And people like Adam and Andy have been working with, substantial companies and seeing who's doing it right and who's not doing it right. And so if you got your own vision and you can help have AI give you all the momentum that you need, great, go do that. But if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't invested in your company in that way, you're probably losing out on a very big ROI. And so find someone like Adam and Andy, or find Adam and Andy and have them start helping your business become AI first.
I did not pay you to say that, but thank you.
I was not paid. I'm like I said, I'm very happy with the results, and they speak for themselves.
Yeah, awesome. Adam, what's your? You followed the journey. You heard Dan's answers. What's your summary of?
My summary is that Dan's experience is wonderful and kind of fun because it's not easy to explain. And, that's the theme and Dan, you've done a great job of explaining it. You've explained examples of how you've gotten people to use it. You've explained specific instances of where productivity and quality is lifted. And yet, if someone were to be like, oh, how does this work? What's the formula? Even what you just said, Dan, is right. It's like, well, you have to personalize it to your company and your culture and your leadership style. And if you if you just trust the process, it'll work out. But that's there's a lot of stuff in life that's really important where you just have to trust the process, right? That's a life lesson. And I think it applies to becoming an AI first CEO and an AI first company, which is you got to do it. You got to trust the process. And if you want to know exactly what all the use cases are and in a nice little bottle and packaged up nicely, you're not going to get it. And yet every single company we've worked with and talked to the CEOs of, they have a story like yours. They're all slightly different, but they all end up by saying, we're transformed, we're different, we took our own journey, and we're better, and we're more productive. And it's unlike any other kind of transformation you've ever been through. And so that's my summary, and I'm so glad you did it and shared it with us, Dan.
I'm happy to do it.
I have three things to say. One is the story that Dan shared about AI is like his laptop, and I couldn't do my job without my laptop. How could I do my job without AI? That feels right to me. And that, I think summarized, other times people have compared AI to electricity. And I think both of those metaphors hold. So that jumped out at me. The second thing that jumped out at me was the story of Dan's lost week and the downside of one sentence where he inadvertently told AI to ignore 90% of the data. But that one sentence, which was, it wasn't an AI error that he highlighted. It wasn't a hallucination. It was an error in prompting, but how that cascaded into a lost week. I've had lost hours. I don't know if I've had lost weeks, but that's a new phenomenon that you can go down and you don't even know that you're going down it. And how you catch that and error check that is a real phenomenon of AI work that didn't exist before. And I think that's it's worth highlighting that and calling that out. And then lastly, I would just say, having been close to Dan's leadership of Influence Mobile's AI first transformation, we always say that AI first transformations start with AI first leaders, and Dan led by example. Dan really was and is and became an AI first CEO, whether he set out to do it or not. There was curiosity, and he led by example. And he was the top of the leaderboard. So like his usage and passion for using it led him to the top of the leaderboard. And guess what? The employees were like, "Oh, this is important to my leader. I'm going to start using it." And it was amazing to be on the journey and watch Dan really embody the kind of leadership principles that we talk about, and seeing it happen was nothing short of beautiful. So those are my concluding comments. With that, I want to say thanks, Dan. Thanks for letting us be a part of your journey. Thanks for calling us out and recommending us to our audience without being paid. I look forward to watching the journey as it unfolds going forward. I want to thank you all for listening to AI First with Adam and Andy. For more resources on how to become AI First, you can go to our website, forum3.com. Download case studies, research briefings, and executive summaries. We have lots of amazing material on the website for leaders looking to expand their knowledge about AI First transformations. We truly believe you can't overinvest in your AI learning. Onward.